Hey guys, how y'all doing?
Is in a human mind, and the weapon that is in this human mind came to me when I saw some alphabetical letters. I saw some letters. At first I thought it was A to Z. Now this is a puzzle to me right now, but God almost said to me, focus on this so that the mystery can be unfolded. The letters were A and Q.
I think it's only appropriate to begin this particular video with the words of the last president of the United States, Barack Obama, who in apparent campaign efforts to American U.S. churches quoted the words of the pastor that you just saw, Kim Clement.
It's such a tough time for our country, with too many families struggling to pay the mortgage and put food on the table. We need that light more than ever. That's why I'm working hard every day to fight for Americans like the millions of members of the Church of God in Christ. And with your support, your prayers, and the leadership of Bishop Blake, I am confident that we will move every single mountain in our way. In the words of a certain preacher from a small church in Los Angeles, I see you in the future, and you look much better than you do right now.
And guess what? That's my saying.
Now, I'm not sure that Kim qualifies as a small-time pastor. At the end of his life, he packed stadiums with standing room only pretty much everywhere that he went.
Let my hands forget their skill, my tongue be silent, cold and still. This bounding heart forget to beat. If I forget your mercy seat.
So now, whoa, slow down, Tiger. I just want to be careful with what we're talking about here. So if Barack Obama trusted Kim Clement, and this is at the same time from 2012, which is roughly the same time frame or surrounding, that Barack Obama is actually using Kim's slogan, without crediting him, for political campaigns. Kim was giving prophecies about a coming movement on the horizon called Q. Well, this might shape up, if you listen carefully, to be one of the most interesting videos you might ever watched.
Your mercy seat. Everybody sing with me. I'll not forget your mercy seat. I'll not forget your mercy seat. All over the world right now. Sing with me. I'll not forget your mercy seat. I'll not forget your
I'd like to state right at the very start of this thing that whether this Q movement was a couple of kids in the basement of mom's house chewing on Cheetos and making some posts, or whether it was the President of the United States himself sitting back with some friends and posting strange, mysterious secrets online, or anything between, it still meets the definition of the prophecies, as the prophecies stated, that there would be large movements of people following something called Q.
We've passed Johannesburg already.
Well, I don't know about that. We've got an hour and 56 minutes left. So, and that's a morning coming up. We have 923 miles left.
Yeah, it's 2 hours from Johannesburg to Cape Town.
Now, speaking of the letter Q, Q is the 17th letter of our English alphabet. In Hebrew, the 7 would be the Zion, very special letter in Hebrew. And the 1 would be the Aleph, the silent letter that starts everything. That's 7 and 1. And of course, 7 and 1 equals 8, the number of new beginnings, the number of people that were on Noah's Ark. We're in South Africa right now. That behind me is Table Mountain. and the tide is coming in. So we're on the most southern part of Africa is where we are right now. It takes a long time to get here. And we're going to be talking about Noah. Now, there were 8 people on that boat. 8, just like the infinity symbol, is an 8 turned sideways. 8 is a number of new beginnings. The day that Jesus came out of the tomb is considered the 8th day. 8 is also the day that Jesus came out of the tomb. So that's why Christians worship on Sunday, because the 8th day would always be your new beginning. Also, an 8 turned on its side is our symbol of infinity. But in Hebrew, whether the modern or the ancient, and we're going to look at both in this video, starting with the modern, all letters have a meaning and also a numerical value. And in the 22 letter, like 11 and 11, another sort of mysterious number, might show up on your clock sometimes. When we read Hebrew from right to left, all languages, in fact, point inwards towards Israel. So we are going to come inward to the 19th letter, 100 right there, of the mystical Hebrew alphabet. The Q is the Kuf, or the number 100. And 100 is not just a universal whole number, it's a large universal whole number. More than that, when you think of Donald Trump, you might think of a crisp $100 bill. This is the modern version of the Kuf in Hebrew. Now I want you to notice that it's comprised of 2 parts. It's the only letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the modern Hebrew alphabet, where one part of the letter goes beneath the line. And that part that's going beneath the line is actually a Zion. So some part of it is going down, and it's going downwards through the use of a Zion. But we go further than this, because in this duality of good versus evil, darkness versus light, which is actually the combo of this unique letter, at the top you have the Resh. Now the Resh, if it's used in the context of God himself, can mean the head man, or the Godhead, or the God-man. But if it's used and couched in an earthly term, which is what we're doing here, then the Resh, this top symbol, and notice it's above, it's covering the Zion, it's trying to hold it down, it's on top of, well, it represents wickedness or evil, an evil hovering above Zion. That letter Resh represents wickedness, as the word for a wicked person begins with the Resh. But, in the case of this unique letter here, when a wicked person wants to take a step back, so if you were in an age or an era where there was to be a step back taken from wickedness, wants to turn from evil and go a step back, then it becomes combined with the Zion, seen right there. And the Zion is a very special number. It's actually a crowned vav, or a sword. And the vav is the number of man. This is a crowned vav. It's also called the divider of time. But if I add that Zion to my Resh, my wickedness, and I add in the Zion, it becomes the letter Kuf, which represents holiness, going from evil, hovering above, stepping back out of, and going to holiness, is what that letter, the Q in Hebrew, represents. Oh, but wait, if I were to combine this duality of these 2 letters, well, I would get Zion and Resh, or the Hebrew word Zar, is what these 2 letters would equal. Well, Zar is the word strange in Hebrew. Now, if I take them and I flip them the other way, it makes the word Raz, which means mysteries and secrets. So this letter Q in Hebrew means strange mysteries and secrets. And I haven't even really gotten started yet with the letter Q. Shall we begin?
Endless love, sing it, everybody. I'll not forget your endless love.
To why that Barack Obama would opt not to credit Kim Clement, whose slogan that he was using, but I can state this, that I find it absolutely fascinating that Kim Clement, of all the pastors and people in the United States, opted to use the words, the very slogan, the main slogan of Kim Clement as part of his attempts to gain support from Christian churches. Now here's where I'm going with that. Thanks for your whole life, but in that house, Jesus appeared to you in the house. You get a shake in your spirit. She gets a shake whenever the Lord, like the Holy Spirit. What are the shakes that you do?
Well, actually, it's a jerk, and so maybe I'm just a jerk for Jesus. JJ.
But it's a jerk. It's a shock in the spirit.
And I just know that I need to pay attention at that point.
Tell me about the journey.
This happened. I began to have this happening during a Kim Clement meeting when we went to Florida and went on a cruise, you and I.
Oh wow. It's let me come right up on it. It was made for him because he loved to journal so much. I have a hope chest full of his journals. And it says the Book of Kim, and then
this is the history, largely on VHS tapes. Stacks of old VHS tapes. The history of this place. Written in the prophet, that all of the other prophets, many of them, a lot of really nice guys.
I can't believe it. This is one of his journals from 2004.
Okay.
Yeah.
He had a beautiful handwriting. Very distinct handwriting. He was writing about the elections.
I'm the number one prophet. A lot of guys say these sort of bold statements about themselves. I can tell you that a lot of those same type of people were the people that were students of Kim. They wish they could have just even been near Kim, longed to be near him. None of them had what Kim had. None of them. Kim was a humble man. So this is Kim Clement's oldest daughter. Please go over and subscribe to their things on House of Destiny, houseofdestiny.com, holding up one of Kim's journals. Donna Clement Petruska is her name.
George W. Bush. This particular.
Can you read it?
October, I received news that I was invited to meet President George W. Bush in Phoenix, Arizona. I was in Nashville at the time. I immediately responded and informed them that I had a word for him.
These clips come from old footage from God in the Nutshell. We're going to get to the Q in a second, but I put a link to, I put together and I sort of buried some stuff in a video. I used to do that, put these nuggets like they do in video games into old videos of mine. Some really unique stuff in this particular old God in the Nutshell video. I put a link to it in the bottom. Kim Clement was asked many times to be an advisor for George Bush.
And so I found that interesting because it talks about him being a citizen of heaven living on earth. It was almost like he was, I don't know, it sounds crazy to say this, but it's almost like he was going back and forth. And he couldn't speak. And maybe there was a reason for him not being able to speak because maybe he was seeing things that he wasn't allowed to tell us.
Okay, so I want to walk you through some of the chain of events that have occurred, starting with during the time of Barack Obama, and I would lay this humbly for submission in Democrats' hands. If Barack Obama found Kim Clement worthy enough to quote his main slogan, then perhaps there are other things, humbly laying your hand, that are worthy of considering from Kim Clement in terms of those prophecies. But during the same time that Barack Obama is using Kim Clement's slogan for presumed political purposes to gain support of Christians, Kim Clement was in that same time frame giving prophecies that following Barack, you would have the election of Donald Trump. Kim was very specific about this for many years, well before Trump even considered or was publicly known as considering even running for president. He was prophesying that Donald Trump would become president, and more than that following his election, the stock market would skyrocket. The Dow, specifically, he stated that it would be a big sign, that it would hit 20,000. That is a precise prophecy following the election of Donald Trump. Further, that during such presidency of Donald Trump, you would have an event that would occur that would keep people from gathering. He called it a strange thing. This is not like 9/11, but that would impact your economies, and that there would be massive bills that would impact your economies even more. Which I, during the time of the coronavirus, began to realize that many of these prophecies at the end of one particular tape began to discuss something very priceless about your economic situation. You have passed at present $6 trillion in debt during the time of this coronavirus.
But Mitch, I'd love you to say a few words, because this man worked 24 hours a day for a long time. This is the result. It's the biggest ever approved in Congress, $6.2 trillion. So, you know, we used to get used to the billion. It used to be million, then it was billion, now it's trillion. And it's going to go a long way. It's going to make a lot of people very happy. Mitch McConnell, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, let me just say this is a proud moment for our country.
Shall be shocked at how he takes the giant down. Now hear me, please. The giant of death, the giants that have come, the brothers of Goliath, stand in glee watching America. We will cripple you. You will lose your credit. But God said, watch. I said 20,000. Look not to Wall Street, however, observe.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average has smashed through the 20,000 point level for the first time ever. Wednesday's rally was helped by strong earnings and President Trump's pro-growth initiatives.
We've seen clips of it. Dr. Anthony Fauci testified before Congress today to explain how much longer mass quarantines must last and what other sacrifices the rest of us need to make in order to fight the Wuhan coronavirus. Fauci has never been elected to anything. You'd never know it. Many of our leaders believe his every word is tantamount to law, and in effect it has been. Just how wise is the man making these laws? Is he rooted in science? We'll let you decide in just a minute.
Lots of stuff, they used to call it pork, that they want to pack into a bill to benefit them and not you.
The first thing to know about this bill is that it's big, maybe the biggest piece of legislation ever proposed in U.S. history. The estimated price tag for everything in this bill is $3 trillion. That's close to 90% of the nation's entire annual tax revenue. And keep in mind, that comes close on the heels of the last coronavirus relief bill that cost about $2 trillion. And of course, our usual annual spending is still there. It hasn't disappeared. So altogether, that's an awful lot of expenses, and every single new dollar will have to be borrowed because there aren't any left. That means that when the smoke clears from all this spending, only China will be able to bail us out.
Right now, while I'm making this particular video, the Democrats are proposing a $3 trillion bill to add to the deficit that's packed with all sorts of ugly things. But, as coincidence would have it, this is in affiliation with H.R. 6666 by the Democrat-run House. And this is for COVID-19 testing, reaching, and contacting everyone. Trace Act. It's about as bogus as it comes in this bill. Not to bring it up, but H.R. 666 is the Department of Homeland Security Insider Threat and Mitigation Act. Just thought I'd mention it. Well, China, who the Democrat medias were really defending to the hilt, they started to back away from that now. I believe the lucky number in China is actually, a lot of people don't know this, the lucky number in China is 666. Now, speaking of the $3 trillion bill being proposed by the Democrats, that Tucker Carlson is stating here he might believe that the only one that could bail us out from Nancy Pelosi's $3 trillion proposal would be China, possibly. But here's what's fascinating about that.
They'll have to. They're the only ones who can afford it. China has the strongest balance sheet in the world. At that point, we will be their vassals. So is it worth it? What will we get in return for doing that? Well, we spent all day reading Pelosi's bill to find out. Too few did that. We did. And here's what we found. First and most glaringly, with more than 30 million Americans out of work, really the last thing we need is more illegal low-wage labor from abroad. Yet this bill goes out of its way to supply illegal immigrants, who, in case you needed to be reminded, have no right to be here in the first place, with billions in taxpayer dollars. According to House Democrats, illegal immigrants must have a right to have the $1,200 checks that American citizens received in the last bill. They would also receive the same direct payments as American citizens going forward. So, in effect, it's a huge payoff, the Democratic Party's most cherished constituency, a group that's not even allowed to be here.
Is that China has, the piggy bank of the world, is and has always been Africa. Actually, South Africa, founded by the Dutch, or the Afrikaans. And they have been impoverishing and taking away from those Afrikaans people really for a long time, since Sweden. Remember that, Sweden pops up a lot in all of this stuff going on. And Sweden also, for some reason, knew better than to do any lockdowns.
You've been in isolation then for some time, I guess, at your apartment there in Stockholm. What has life been like for you?
But I isolated myself anyway, and because it is the right thing to do.
During this coronavirus. And their numbers of deaths are better than most of the other countries. And, meaning less than. Sweden was also the first in the EU, and the EU was prophesied by a prophet from South Africa named the Seer. But Sweden was the first to desire the splitting up, the tearing apart of Israel into Israel and Palestine. And the Palestinian areas, even the Palestinians I go visit, they all want Israel to be Israel. Because the Palestinian areas are war-torn. It's like Sweden likes places to be war-torn.
And in Sweden, the situation is maybe a bit different from other countries, maybe in the US. But so yeah. But of course, I have been almost only in my apartment, which have been. Well, I can still do things from home, so I can't really complain. So I've been doing things that I before didn't have time to do, so I was very lucky.
So I guess CNN is now telling me that this child here is not only a climate change expert, but is also a coronavirus expert. Now, one thing I could not get over in these clips is how serious Anderson Cooper, this is crashing and burning in flames, but he will get on there and find some detail or complain about a tweet for an hour if he could. Look how absolutely dead on seriously they take this Greta, the climate girl, Thunberg, or whatever her name is, from Sweden.
We are broadcasting from the very windy Swedish city of Visby on Sweden's largest island, Gotland, located about 60 miles off the southeastern coast of Sweden in the Baltic Sea. We're in the middle of an event called Almedalen Week, a week-long political festival, perhaps unlike any other in the world. Over 25,000 people are gathering on the island to hear political speeches and take part in seminars. Every Swedish political party is represented here, from the Social Democrats to the Greens to the New Feminist Initiative Party. The name Almedalen comes from a park here in Visby, where in 1968, Sweden's education minister at the time, Olof Palme, stood on the back of a flatbed truck and gave one of the rousing political speeches for which he was renowned. Palme went on to become one of Sweden's most transformative prime ministers up until his assassination on the streets of Stockholm.
Okay, so there's a couple of terms here that might become important. So this reporter out there, this Swedish reporter out there, apparently talking about events surrounding Stockholm, where Greta is from. Greta, our climate change expert. It's a radical group of socialists, hardcore socialist people out there, a small group in Sweden. And they had supported letting Mandela loose. Another term, ANC, that's the government right now in South Africa, under which you have the farm murders in South Africa, in those settlements, those cities founded by the Dutch, the British, the English. Well, the signs here make it fairly clear. Honeymoon is over for white people in South Africa. And this is by the EFF. So you have two groups, the ANC, the African National Congress, and the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters. The signs are fairly clear. A revolutionary must become a cold-killing machine motivated by pure hate. Now, I can understand why China is buying up cheap all of the mineral-rich land. I mean, they'd be foolish not to. Well, we're the only people in America that give money to countries like South Africa and these governments and get nothing in return. Why would Sweden and other places have an interest in putting people like this in to those areas? It's a fair question, isn't it? There's a reason why even blacks are against, well, first of all, because blacks are good people. And many people don't support just massacring other people. But there's also a reason they might not like the ANC, which started with Mandela.
While the United States considered the African National Congress a terrorist organization, the Swedish government openly funded the group for decades, even though it was banned by the South African government. According to many accounts, Sweden was the largest single source of financial aid to the ANC. Shortly after he was released in 1990, Nelson Mandela came to Sweden on one of his first foreign stops after being released from prison.
I mean, Mandela's wife, after they took power, became very popular. First, they were cutting off the noses of blacks that disagreed with them. Then they went on to popularize a term called the necklace. And this was against blacks, which is a small reason why black people might not be thrilled. Just one reason why they might not be thrilled with the ANC. That his wife would put a tire around your neck, or have it done, fill it with gasoline and light you on fire. And it turns out both white or black people, it's immune to color, really don't like this. No one likes this. It's terrifying.
And the most frightening threat of all.
With our necklaces, we shall liberate this country.
The latest victim of the necklace died this weekend after the bodies of unrest victims were found in unmarked coffins. The undertaker's home was burnt down, a petrol-soaked tire was put around her neck and set alight. Death by the necklace, reserved for so-called collaborators. Mrs. Mandela's fiery politics, her appeal as a martyr after the years of state harassment, threatened to raise the political temperature still further.
Now, I know that they portray Nelson Mandela in a lot of Hollywood movies, and he's just the best thing since sliced bread and apple butter. And they'll have Morgan Freeman play him on film. But here's where one of the small reasons, and again, I'm not trying to nitpick on the guy, one of the small reasons that the Americans might have defined him as a terrorist is because, well, in one instance, he set off a car bomb that killed 19 people and wounded 200 plus others. And again, I'm not trying to be judgmental against the dude. I know this stuff can get overplayed. You killed 19 people, so big deal. I'm just suggesting that when Sweden came in and bulldogged them to let Mandela out of prison after killing 19 people and wounding hundreds of others, and then put him in charge of the country which leads the ANC today, that might not have been a great decision.
I would like to take this opportunity to salute this outstanding democratic institution, the Swedish Parliament.
Now, I just find the numbers in all of this fascinating. So this 66, 6 PS wink, that actually stands for a wink, for the VER, that stands for the ANC. So basically they're handing the power over to the ANC government in South Africa as per the pressure from Sweden. And of course the number is, as always, why wouldn't it be 666? Makes sense, right?
The democratic movement and the sovereign people of our country. From here, you have provided moral and political leadership, which has inspired many others throughout the world and sustained us in those dark days in prison.
And boy, isn't that weird, all these things? In fact, we covered just in our pandemic the God Pandemic video, that it was also Sweden where the first vaccines, the fetuses, the dead babies that were used to make vaccines, came from, where this young lady is from.
In your entire career, how many fetuses have you worked with?
Well, I don't remember the exact number, but quite a few when we were studying them originally, before we decided to use them to make vaccines.
Some of these were for psychiatric institutions, correct?
Actually, all I can say is that the fetuses that I personally worked with actually came from Sweden.
Where they didn't shut down anything for the coronavirus. What did they know that we didn't?
Kids should take it seriously, because not only could there be, underlying conditions, but also, even if their symptoms are very mild, it's still possible to infect family members.
Yes, exactly, and that's why I decided to post about it, to sort of spread the information that many people don't even notice that they have symptoms, and then they might spread the virus without even knowing it.
Look how seriously he takes this young lady. And more than this, what she's stating, if I'm to understand, CNN's new expert on the coronavirus, is stating that this is a pandemic so bad that you gotta look carefully, otherwise you might not even notice it. Boy, glad we were told to shut down the economy by this news organization over something like that. Now, the argument that I'm really making in this is a lot larger than Sweden or some think tank of guys looking for population control here, there, or yonder, or sets of billionaires or behind the scenes guys, nor any specific country or the minerals of South Africa or the objectives of China. All of these, by the way, are hardcore communist socialist systems, which is where extreme liberalism will go to. Now, conversely, if you go too far the other way, on the right, you're going to end up with really ugly, dangerous stuff as well. Greater than any of that, they view the United States, many of these places view the United States as a light that needs to be extinguished. I do not believe in the prophecies, nor in the book of Revelation, that it ends the way they believe that it ends, even according to their own prophecies. But underlying all of this, why you're dealing with systems that like to pull people down and to destroy, kill, steal, and destroy, is because you're in a larger spiritual battle.
And in the following 2 weeks, which is a 3-week period, he shall slowly come to the fore. For they are saying, how do we kill the giant? How do we kill the giant of debt? How do we kill the giant of socialism? How do we kill the giant of human secularism? I have placed that man amongst you, a humble man. And as Samuel stood before the brothers, and they had rejected David to come because of his age, take all these little remarks I'm giving you. They are gems. The name and the word gold. Remember that. A man that is amongst them but is young. And God says, these that shall reject him shall be shocked at how he takes the giant down. Now hear me please.
This word gold, which I get into a lot deeper, which I put in the Edge of Prophecy that we put up on the God in a Nutshell website. But does the gold, all of it, and all of the other rich minerals of South Africa belong to China? Well, you, if you're in America, literally pay for it, and it belongs to China? I would just pose that question. This on the screen is the ancient form, what they would call the pre-Canaanite form, the original tongue of angels and men, the original Hebrew, the Kuf. I want you to notice it's a circle with a line that's going through it. Now in ancient Phoenician, that would be a circle with a line coming down underneath the line, representing or thought to represent the head of a needle. Now Jesus said, now notice it's 100 down here. 100 would be 10 times 10, or the perfect square. But 100 could also be that $100. The $100. Pride comes with, Jesus said it's harder for a rich man to enter heaven than for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. Then he went on to state, but with God all things are possible. And the reason he said that is because vanity brings pride. Money, power brings pride. I would be very careful in some respects of the letter Qaf, because Qaf can also have a falsehood element to it, that it looks one way, but it's really another way, just like that duality, or the two trees in the garden, or two paths. Now, Jesus goes on to state that, well, the eye of the needle in the ancient world was a gate that you would enter a city through, and they would build the gate low so that armies couldn't just rush in. Now, if you were bringing your camels, you would have to take everything off of the camel's back, and the camel would have to get on its knees. To make entrance to the city, it would have to humble itself. Now, another unique thing is that this symbol is believed to represent a monkey, like you might find the origin of monkeys in Africa. Now, the nature of a monkey and the symbolic meaning of a monkey is vanity, primal instinct. So the letter Q represents a necessity to rise above, murderous, toward all of the qualities of evil, to rise above the fleshly qualities and enter into spiritual qualities. This letter also represents the removing of the shell that covers a man to reveal the true soul of the man, whether light or dark.
The Spirit of God says one more thing I want to talk to you about. That little dwarf in North Korea, I'm getting a little tired of him. I think I'm going to go and pay him a visit, says the Lord. You watch and see what I do.
Come on.
And that will be a big sign that the man that I'm sending with a stone for the giant is emerging, says the Lord.
Kim Clement was from South Africa, where they're currently crying out for land or death. That means that they want to kill the white people. So basically what amounts to tribes that have taken control of the government there want to kill the white people and take the land away. And here's the truth of that factor. They want to sell it off to China. Now, Kim was prophesying that this strange attack that would keep people from gathering and would impact the financial systems. He was making those prophecies at the same time that Bill Gates, seen on the screen here, with South African president, ex-South African president Zuma, who is accused of fraud and basically stealing and looting the entire country. He was making those prophecies at the same time that Bill Gates was giving his TED Talk on how there would be a coming virus that looks nearly identical to the coronavirus that you're suffering from today, all covered in the age of prophecy. But more than this, this is a prophet from South Africa from the early 1900s that was prophesying world events from today.
His prophecies are steeped in his unshakable faith in the God of Israel, the God of the Afrikaner nation. Of himself he said, I am only a messenger from God.
De Heere is mijn herder, mij zal niets ontbreken.
The only book he ever read was the Bible. He read it by spelling each word separately, as he had been taught by his mother.
Aan zeer stille wateren. Hij verkwikt mijn ziel. Hij leidt mij ten het spoorberg.
This is the copy behind his home where, early in the mornings, he used to climb to the top. Here, alone with his Bible, he had most of his visions. In later years, he dictated what he saw to his daughter, Anna van Rensburg. Sitting in the forecorner with her father, she wrote down the prophecies in the school exercise books of the time.
Now, if you fast forward to today, I don't believe South Africa is trite in any of these situations. It's something that America should pay attention to. Now, it's not just that prophet from the early 1900s whose daughter was the one following his death, delivering his prophecies to the world. If you fast forward to now, that's Donna Clement Petruska, Kim Clement's daughter, who is delivering Kim Clement's prophecies to your world today.
Ik zie een nieuwe republiek.
These are the original books of Anna van Rensburg, in which she wrote down her father's visions. Here is the prophecy of the explosion at Chernobyl, as dictated by her father on the evening of October the 22nd, 1923. And on March the 30th, 1918, she wrote down Sinner's vision of what scholars now believe to be AIDS.
Speaking of viruses and AIDS, and I might recommend to you, when you finish this video, type in a Dr. Gary Davis in connection with Dr. Fauci. Dr. Gary Davis, who died after having a vision of a cure for AIDS. Dr. Fauci is your top guy on AIDS. I'm not going to make any more comments on it, but just take a look at that. Connection between his death and studies and research where people were being healed of AIDS, cured of AIDS, allegedly, in Africa.
Linda says the serum wasn't just killing the virus, it was doing it quickly. Doug was there when the lab results came back.
And that was all just glowing and was considered to be, just the capping the thing off that really gave them the proof they needed.
He says Dr. Davis and Linda were overjoyed.
Linda wept. He said, I told you this is exactly how this was going to come out. He wasn't surprised at the least. The viral count had dropped to the point it was undetectable.
I was shocked, I was amazed, I was in awe.
At that point, Doug started visually documenting Dr. Davis's research. They flew to the next door country of Ghana, whose government paid for yet another clinical trial. Doug says 2 men and a husband and wife came into the clinic. 4 people, all desperate, dealing with a virus they knew would kill them.
They were obviously very, very sick. They exhausted all means of any help there, and they knew they basically had a long, slow slide to the end.
In this never-before-seen footage, Dr. Davis introduced himself to the patients and told them what to expect.
Until 2 years has passed, not 2 days. 2 years have passed, with you being off of all medication, can we say this is a cure?
Then Dr. Davis gave the patients 2 injections, 1 in each arm.
It was a big needle and a lot, and it was obviously very painful. In very short order, felt and looked much better. When they came back the next day, they looked better, they walked better, they talked stronger, they were optimistic.
Well, now I feel better than before I came here.
Doug documented injections and reaction over the next several days.
And you slept well?
I slept very well.
And you ate well?
I ate very well.
Exactly what he said would happen happened.
He returned to the United States to try and get approval, and the last offices he was talking to were the offices appears to be, according to Fox News reports from the time, which are hard to find on the internet anymore, with Dr. Fauci's office. He never made his flight back to Africa, where they were asking for him to come back and do more work with patients with AIDS, where he could not get approval here in the United States, revolving around, apparently, dialogues with Dr. Fauci's office.
Medicine on top of medicine.
By the time Precious was 6, Rocky knew her little girl could die any day. Rocky was desperate. So when she heard about a doctor in Tulsa who said he had a new treatment he created by injecting a goat, Rocky didn't care if it sounded crazy.
It didn't matter how nuts it was right at that point in time.
In 1998, Rocky made arrangements to get on a train with Precious to travel 1,000 miles to meet this doctor and his so-called goat serum, and she didn't tell a soul.
Nobody wasn't going to talk me out of doing what I did.
When Rocky and Precious got to Tulsa, they met Dr. Gary Davis, a family practitioner who'd injected goats with the AIDS virus and then used the antibodies the goats made to create a serum. Dr. Davis died in 2007, but Rocky says when she met him, she could tell he just wanted to make sick people well.
He was a man of God that wanted to help people. And he said God had given him this vision to go get the antibody from this goat.
Rocky says she asked the doctor dozens of questions, and he even showed her a vial of the serum itself. She says when the doctor wasn't looking, she did something only a desperate mother would do.
But I know I took it.
What do you mean you took it?
I took the serum.
You stole it?
I stole it.
Did you think about asking Dr. Davis?
He couldn't.
You asked him for
I did.
And what did he say?
He couldn't do it because it wasn't FDA approved.
Rocky says with the knowledge she had, she gave Precious the serum, and within hours, Precious was different, full of energy, the kind a 6-year-old should have.
It scared me that she was all over the place, jumping off the couch.
Rocky says over the next few days, she kept giving Precious injections until the serum was gone.
She was just up, running around, wanting to eat.
Did you know for sure it was the serum?
It had to be the serum because she wasn't on anything. She wasn't taking anything.
Rocky and Precious came home to Washington, D.C., and Rocky says part of her was terrified someone would find out what she had done. But when she looked at how healthy Precious was, she didn't care.
What did I have to lose? Her? You know, lock me up? Okay, that's a chance I was going to take.
Not long after she got home, Precious went for a checkup. Doctors at the National Institutes of Health were monitoring her. When the lab report came back, Rocky says everyone was stunned about Precious's viral load.
I started shaking, I was sweating. I said, "Come here, Precious." And we was in there jumping and screaming, and I was like, "Your viral load is 0. Baby, your viral load is 0. And she was, you know, oh my God, you talk about a good feeling. And at that point in time, I didn't care. I got on the phone, called Dr. Davis, and it was like a party.
Was he mad at you?
No, not at all.
He understood. He understood you were a desperate mother.
He understood the desperation.
Her lab report showed Precious's viral load was undetectable. There was no sign of the HIV virus in her blood. Had any other medication done that?
Never.
Had any other medication come close?
Never.
Rocky says she didn't know how to tell the doctors at the NIH what she had done, but soon after they were all there at the Congressional Black Caucus, where an obviously healthier Precious was the keynote speaker.
I know many of you are looking at me and saying, what could a little girl like me have to say? My name is Precious Thomas.
You know, you would think that somebody that looked like they had something that might be a cure for AIDS would be top news, but it's almost like, I don't know, it almost seems like or feels like they're trying to bury it. Now, the good news is they did find another little girl to tell you all about climate change.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean.
Now, I did also look at the cost of the AIDS treatments, the HIV treatments. Man, that comes up to, per patient, that comes up to about $20,000 a year. If you had something where you just took a few shots and it was gone, man, that would be a life-saving problem to so many. But I've got to admit, on the other end of it, man, it would cost some people probably billions and billions and billions of dollars. But the good news is we've got a spokesperson on coronavirus, which could hurt your economies, but the good news is you won't get the flu.
Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Now, it sounds like whoever's the puppeteer behind all this is really against economic growth for you and your families. In fact, do these climate change scripts sound an awful lot like the coronavirus scripts to you? And also the air, we need to tax for the air. The Prince of the Air wants his tax for the air. George Soros does a bunch of stuff out there in Sweden too. It's not flattering. None of this. None of this. And you guys over there know it.
Rocky decided that would be the time Precious would tell the world about the serum. Rocky says she was literally sick with worry.
I was nervous. I was sick. I was sick.
Who would have thought something this special could be found in a goat?
That's when the story came out.
Then what happened?
Nothing.
Rocky says she tried to talk to health officials at the NIH about the serum. She was hoping she could help Dr. Davis get his serum approved by the Food and Drug Administration. And what did they say?
They weren't a part of it. It was like nobody wanted to talk about it.
Somebody could have with us and could have been approved, should have been approved, and it could have helped people.
I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
At the same time Rocky gave the serum to Precious, Dr. Davis was working with the FDA to get a clinical trial. But that clinical trial never happened.
Just thought I'd mention it, and those are just old news reports from 1999, 2000. You ought to take a look.
Is Dr. Davis's serum the only medication you've ever taken out of all these medications that actually made your viral load go down that significantly and down to zero?
Yes.
It worked.
Now Rocky's afraid that when Dr. Davis died, the cure for AIDS may have died with him.
All he wanted to do was help. So it's like we'll never know.
I asked representatives at the NIH if they would consider looking into the serum today, but they didn't seem interested. Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the AIDS division of the NIH, did give us this statement. Quote, not only is there not any basis for it to work, but there is evidence to the contrary that it won't work because this type of approach has been tried before in an even more sophisticated way.
I wish they'd just give us an opportunity. Just give us a chance.
How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight. You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe.
Boy, it's almost like somebody's itching away for kind of a new war, a new kind of war with America, and it's a strange kind of war. Strange maybe needs to be on both sides.
And then there is a nation he showed me and took me, itching for a new kind of war with America. out, impeach, impeach, they say. But nay. This nation shall come very subtly. But he shall not come in the time of President Obama. They shall come when this new one arises, my David, that I have set aside for this nation.
Again, what I'm really speculating here is that with the election of Donald Trump was a real surprise to some folks, and that some things went another way than they had planned. But I think that even if pagans would pay attention to their own pagan prophecies, you know, the Lord is in charge of this place. And that's what was not factored in any of those equations. The Q is actually the 17th letter of our English alphabet. And 701, of course, is 8. This comes right out of the book Nimrod that I'm opening right here. Abraham, this is chapter 8, just like 8 is the symbol of infinity, which would be attached to this letter. Abraham was the great father of faith. Genesis 15 says, Abraham trusted God, and it was accounted unto him as righteousness. Now, Abraham had to pass through the fires of Nimrod. And when he passed through, after he passes through the fires of Nimrod, and that's a story most people don't know, you have a lot of wickedness. Israel is a duality. You have a lot of wickedness that comes out of Israel. You have a lot of wickedness that comes out of every set of people. But there's a great blessing. Israel is the only set of people that have a blank check. God told Abraham, I will bless those that bless thee and curse those that curse thee. Therefore, the end times always revolve. That's the only nation that's got a blank check, whether for good or for evil. In Genesis 15, beginning in verse 8, right down here, the covenant of the pieces. That's what this is. It was the custom of men to do contracts in a way where they would walk between the pieces of a sacrifice that was cut in two and make a figure 8, an infinity symbol for the sacrifice. Only in this particular case, God came as fire and passed between the pieces to make the statement, I will keep my end of the bargain even if you don't, knowing who the Lord is. God says without faith in the God of Israel, it is impossible to please God. But if we keep looking at those prophecies from the 1900s, because this is going to lead us through to Kim Clement's prophecies of today. Watch this.
Nicholas Sinner von Rensburg saw world events in the coming millennium in stark detail. These are some of his visions that have a bearing on the times we live in. On December the 13th, 1918, he predicts the emergence of the European Economic Union. April the 4th, 1919. In Europe, I see 3 sickles merge into one. I see the wagons rolling in from north to east. They look like Turkish wagons, but they are new and covered in canvas. Wagons rolling always indicated war. June the 8th, 1919. In Europe, I see 3 troughs filled with dry grass. A Turk sets them on fire. The fire burns fiercely, then it suddenly dies. In 1991, Saddam Hussein attacked 3 countries, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. He set fire to the oil wells. The fires burned fiercely, but were eventually brought under control. The scene then speaks of another war to come, a war in which Russia slides back into communism and joins China and the Middle East to fight against America and Germany. The war is won by the West, with Germany becoming the leading economic nation on earth. England is all but destroyed in this fight. I see a great war, fast and furious. It will be fought mostly from the skies. I see weapons that we have not even dreamt of. Germs that cause sickness and electric rays that devastate the earth.
So here behind me, here is the Dutch arriving to settle South Africa in 1652. That behind them, this is Cape Town, and that's Table Mountain. Now you notice flags showing up on these Dutch ships. Now there's a flag called Vierde Kleur Flag. Vierde Kleur Flag. And that's going to become important as we get further into this. That's the pre-apartheid flag of South Africa. And this painting and this image of the Dutch arriving here, that in the background, that would be modern day Cape Town, South Africa. Settled, built, founded by the Dutch, or what's called today the Afrikaans. And right there behind it is the famous Table Mountain of South Africa. So we're in South Africa. That's Table Mountain that's behind me in Cape Town. This is as far south in Africa as you're gonna get. Oh, and by the way, Shell Oil Company, where my father was had a special job to the vice president of Shell Oil Company. You know why they have the Shell on Shell Oil Company? Why they have that on top of the Shell stations? Well, Shell is owned by Royal Dutch. And the Shell is because that company is so old that during the days of the Romans, they used seashells to lay the roads for the Romans. And those roads were put in by Royal Dutch Shell. That's what I look like right down there. That's the picture of me. This is my mother and father. So my dad is where I get the Smith from, and my name. My dad had 2 PhDs. He actually worked one summer over at Area 51. That was always a running joke in the family. He worked, and it was true though, he worked at Area 51, whose eyes were opened by God, saw a vision of the Holy One in the heavens, which the angels, this is a story about angels. So these are some clips from an old Enoch video, but some of these clips tie some things together that are going to play a role in where we're going in this video. He worked over at Los Alamos Labs. That's where the atom bomb was developed.
I had a stellar offer with Computer Sciences Corporation, who's now second only to Microsoft. And I was going to be managing, I think, a group of like 20 PhD mathematicians. So that was going to be in Virginia Beach. And so I didn't want any of these jobs, actually.
And from them, I heard everything. And from them, the angels, I understood as I saw. These were God's angels.
And so I'm driving back down the street, and I don't think I'd ever been on that street before. And I'm passing by these 3 buildings, and this voice says to me, well, I'm at the second building, says your job is waiting for you in that building. And so what I did about that was a U-turn in the middle of the street. And I walked in, and this place was austere. This was Shell Research, and I mean, there's no marquees, there's no name, there's no literature on the table.
Look at all the software that does the security software, or portions of it that would take things in and out of Wright-Patterson. That's supposedly where the aliens are kept. He retired from Shell. He's the intellectual of the amazing.
And so there was a receptionist, and I walked up and I said, my name is Earl Smith, and I've heard you're looking for some good people. And I didn't bother telling her where I heard that was 5 minutes ago in the car by myself. And
anyhow, that's Dad, and the end of that story there. Sorry for the bad audio quality. Our stuff's gotten better over the years, but if you can tolerate it, put a link actually to that's an interesting video. Put a link to it in the bottom. and putting up some other cool stuff. But the end of that story is that the receptionist said, well, I don't know if there's anybody that can talk to you, but let me just go check. And Dad ended up spending several hours with a man in the lobby of that building. And at the end of it, the man said, I don't really think we have any positions that are open, but it's been a real honor talking to you, and it's been a real joy talking to you. And his Dad was turning to walk out the door. He said, well, wait a second. I guess that just means that I'll have to create a job for you here, a Shell Oil Company. The man my father spoke to turned out to be vice president of Shell. And Dad retired from there. It's kind of a cool story, particularly one that starts with a voice coming out of thin air. So, and I'm part Dutch myself, but speaking of aliens in a foreign land, I want to get back to that in a second. I remember right when this stuff struck, it wasn't just the prophecies of Kim, and I actually was with my father when the coronavirus lockdowns began. And I went in, the first thing he said to me, I said, what do you think about all this? And he said, those silly people with their population reduction meetings in the 1970s. You know, he went to a few of those, apparently, and didn't tell me anything much about them, or maybe he did. But I know this, that he said he stopped going because they were boring. Kim Clement, who had some prophecies for Bill Gates that I keep really recommending that he listen to, standing there in this photo next to Zuma, who everyone agrees looted and robbed the country. He's up on criminal charges. It was all over the news while I was there in South Africa. Well, it wasn't just nurses, as they claim, but it was both whites and blacks that loved the Lord, who, when Kim Clement was born, prophesied, this is a child from South Africa that will know the future. It's not just that Kim Clement was from South Africa, or Elon Musk, who is finding favor with the President of the United States. That's a man I like. I'd like to meet that man one day. But Elon Musk, who's from South Africa, where they're right now, they're persecuting both whites and blacks. The truth is they're trying to sell all of it out to China. Okay, so I'm absolutely positive that you've heard of all of the farm murders, like this young man here holding, and these are very, very common. The government in South Africa has stated that black students have a passing degree of 30% in their country. And not only that, seems to be a lot of encouragement for them to hate white people, and particularly all of those, you probably heard of the farm murders, all of those farms where whites are being murdered out of the very farms that provide for the country happen to be sort of earmarked land that is mineral rich going to China.
90% of all the money aid food that is distributed now comes from white and brown people. It may not be given to whites, so says the law, and so rules Judge Kalapan. Get that? So the food parcels that traditionally certain charities have collected and delivered to white impoverishment camps where people are starving, they've got no money, they now have to give those food parcels to the ANC government, where it'll be distributed to black communities. So what happens to that white community? They starve.
South Africa used to be called the piggy bank of the world. I know some things about this. My dad worked some unusual jobs in his life. That's the piggy bank of the world. And it's getting sold out to China, the land that Kim Clement and Elon Musk, and also Walter Veith, another man that I dearly like from South Africa.
Today, I was attacked all day, yesterday, over trying to help people raise money to feed people of whites being turned away from receiving food.
I want you to notice one thing about Africa. I just came back from South Africa, which is down here at the bottom. I'd like you to notice how enormous that Africa is. Now, part of the arguments by what's called the ANC government, is that South Africa should be, basically that all of Africa should be the property of only black people. This is part of their arguments. Let me be clear about this. This isn't about blacks. Those leaders that come actually from different tribes that really hate each other, they're not sharing anything with the blacks. In fact, they're doing all that they can, or appear to be doing all that they can, to suppress those blacks on the ground, and particularly ones from other groups of blacks.
We were seated together at the lunch table, So we never really got time to talk about the tweet. It was just an opportunity to shake hands, to say how are you and all that. But on the tweet itself, he was clearly misinformed. And whoever gave him that information was completely wrong. There are no killings of farmers or white farmers in South Africa.
That's the current president of South Africa. His name is Ramaphosa, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. Here's the truth, is that in fact, they've been whitewashing all sorts of stuff off of the internet. If I were to show you images, which you can find, you have to hunt. You've got pages that are being censored on the internet that are full. If you saw the images and the things that are being done to people while these statements are being made at the UN, it would make your gut literally sick, and it doesn't matter what color you are. Now, of course, they would never actually make that argument to Egypt, which is also, I visited Egypt to go in, I mean, Egypt would obviously laugh if people from any one of these countries in Africa came up and say, we own Egypt. It would be absolutely crazy. No part of the world, no country in the world would even accept or remotely think of accepting if any one of these 9 trillion African countries were to state, we own Egypt. They can no longer practice Islam. They can no longer have their own country. We own all of their government buildings. No one would accept it.
This includes, Honorable Buthelezi, how we will also handle the issue of the Ingonyama Trust. No one is saying that land must be taken away from our people. Rather, it is how we make sure that our people will have equitable access to land and security of tenure. That is how we are going to handle this.
Now, let me tell you what Ramaphosa is stating there. He's guaranteeing the Zulu kings. That's where this is going to go back to. Okay, well, he's guaranteeing the Zulu kings or the Zulu king that the land, his stuff ain't going to be touched, that the land is going to be gotten from the Afrikaans, that means the white people, and they're going to take it away. And by the way, they're not giving it to the black person on the ground. They're selling it to China so they can all buy jet planes and mansions, is historically what they've all done. Bottom line, what's being stated there is we're taking land from the English, the British, the Dutch, the Afrikaans, all the white people. We're taking it away from them. That's what they're stating in these very meetings and discussing how they're going to do that.
If you are going to give this land, you said something, you are going to give the land to our people. Now please tell us, who is not our people in this country? Who is our people? Who is not our people? Who is not our people? Who is our people? Who are you going to give the land to? You take it from whom? And to whom are you going to give it?
Point of order,
Who is our people? I must ask, who is our people? Who is not our people? Comrade Terra, when you went to prison, Robben Island, you were a black consciousness. And when you came back, you became a historical mistake, which came out of Robben Island. You can't ask the question, who are your people? Because the National Democratic Revolution answers that question. It says the motive forces that stands to benefit from the victories of this revolution. Those are our people.
This man is a very good man right here. He actually left the ANC over corruption. This is heading somewhere in the prophecies. His name is Lakota. He's a good man in South Africa.
For me to give you 2 rand, I'd have to be the last man on earth, or you have to have a gun in my head. White people are murderers, man. You've killed our forefathers. You are here illegal, and you still want me to give you a 2 rand. My man, I feel disrespected.
So it's been for a long time there illegal for a white person of any sort to speak anything bad or even perceived bad against a black person and that's just where some of it started, the suppression of speaking at all. Now it's illegal right now today to speak anything negative of the actions of the government, which means they can't post or tell you anything while things are being whitewashed off the internet. And more than this, it's actually a crime right now as I make this tape for you to donate food. The businesses have been taken away from the whites. These people are living in terror. And now, as they're moving out onto the streets, it's illegal to give them food.
I'm sitting here nicely, working in the beach, in the ocean, and relaxing. You're coming here to disturb me. Why are you doing this, my brother?
I am hungry.
You're hungry? But my forefathers would kill me if I had to give a children to a white man. No hard feelings, my brother.
We must see this process of accelerated land redistribution as an opportunity rather than as a threat. And I'd like to invite all South Africans not to see this issue, this pain that many of our people are still going through. We should never see it as a threat. We should rather see it as a great opportunity.
Shortly before his death in 1926, the Sino talked about a recurring vision he'd had. I see a small, emaciated black boy rising up out of the earth. I see him grow into a mighty warrior. He rises up to his full stature from the earth. Above his head he lifts his assegai and shield up to the sky. His shadow falls across the whole of our land. This is far into the future. Then I see him vanish in a cloud. Blue was the color for Germany, just as red was the color of the enemy.
Why not Mashaba? Why not Soli and all of that? Because the mayor of DA in PE is a white man.
That man's name is Julius Malema, and he is a big name in their parliament. And may turn out to be the next president, should things keep going this way, but is definitely right there meeting with Ramaphosa all the time. In fact, lots of things are getting whitewashed off of the internet, including many of Ramaphosa's statements about whites. But the towns that he just mentioned, they've been renaming towns to take the white names away from the towns that were founded by the Dutch and also the British. The town he's talking about is Port Elizabeth. That's where Kim Clement was born.
So these people, when you want to hit them hard, go after a white man. They feel a terrible pain because you have touched a white man. Not because Mashaba and Soli will not be touched. They will be touched, don't worry. But we are starting with this whiteness. We are cutting the throat of whiteness. Whiteness.
Okay, so all of this stretches back to what's called the Battle of Blood River. Guys, these people in South Africa, the piggy bank of the world that the United States has been pouring funding into in aid, and also that Israel has been helping in aid. Guys, those people out there, those Afrikaans, those Dutch people, guys, they're in trouble. The Dutch had arrived in 1652. So the Zulus didn't actually even discover that down there way in the bottom of Africa that there were some Dutch people in a pocket there that were developing settlements. The Zulus didn't arrive in South Africa until even 1709. But in 1838,
this day of the year was proclaimed as the day of the vow.
Okay, now I want you to remember that term that he used, Day of the Vow. Now,
to remember the fierce battle of 1838 at the Ngome River between the Voortrekkers and the Zulu warriors under the leadership of His Majesty King Dingaan.
They surrounded the Dutch. They surrounded the Dutch, who were all in cattle cars. There were 400, just a little more than 400 Dutch. This is recorded as actual history. This isn't made up. And there were 10,000 to 15,000 Zulu warriors that surrounded this wagon camp.
In that historic battle, brave Zulu warriors with assegais succumbed in large numbers to the firepower of the Voortrekkers. And it is said the Ngome River ran red with the blood of those freedom fighters. For they were freedom fighters, because they were fighting for the freedom of our land. And they sacrificed immensely, fighting against invaders.
And the Dutch, now today called the Afrikaans, they worked out a deal with the Zulus. They kept attacking and said, we will help you get your cattle back from these other tribes that had taken the Zulu king's cattle. And the Dutch went in and helped him get his cattle back. And when they brought the cattle back, the Zulu king said, oh, we don't want you to come armed into our camp, but thank you. And they welcomed them in. And then they slaughtered out 69 Dutch men who had just helped the Zulu king. This is a different story than Ramaphosa is telling, isn't it? Then they went in, the Zulu king, after they slaughtered those men, and they went and they slaughtered their women and children. Hundreds of them. Well, the other Dutch heard about this.
We can move forward knowing that we have addressed the original sin, we have addressed that which has been dividing us, and that we are moving forward with great purpose as South Africans, having resolved what others would have called an intractable problem.
And this is the memorial site to it. And wow, the government today, and they're called freedom fighters, even today, the people running the government over there where these Afrikaans live, and changing the history to make out the Zulus to be victims. They had surrounded well over 10,000 of them had surrounded, and the number is 417. Afrikaans, Dutch people were surrounded in their wagon trains right here at this very spot. And they made a vow. It's called the Day of the Vow. They made a vow to God that's memorialized in history that those new leaders are trying to erase. And that vow was that the land was consecrated to the Lord if he would save their lives. Not one Afrikaner died. And the reason it's called Blood River is because, and the original sin, when you hear Ramaphosa and these others in those offices using these careful words, talk about the original sin for defending themselves against invaders that came from way up north that had discovered them and were trying to steal their things, had raped and murdered their women. And the Zulus are the victims. Victims, tens of thousands of them, surrounding 400 people, and they're the victims. Those Afrikaners defeated those tens of thousands of Zulu tribes that came in. And they did it by going before the Lord and saying, Lord, if you would save our souls, save our lives, this land belongs to God. Today, it's run by African tribes, freedom fighters of today, who practice and believe in most of them. It's all of the tribes believe in witchery, witchcraft. Man, those people that founded those cities, or anybody competent, or America, had some control. And by the way, you've been paying for it. All the gold and minerals, it's underneath all that land, those farms where people are getting murdered or reported to be getting murdered. Man, I tell you what, you could certainly pay off, you could pay off all the debts of Africa, and you could pay off all the debts of America. It's incredible how many minerals are under that ground. It's too bad that it's all, I guess, per Ramaphosa's orders, and also certainly Julius Malema would like in on that as well. The EFF, the economic freedom fighters of the modern age. Well, it's just too bad that all of that goes to them and whoever's behind them. So, and these behind me on the screen, these are the queues and lines to get food right now in South Africa. You know, there's a lot of cold soup in Johannesburg. In fact, the electricity, ever since the Dutch and the British lost their land, even the electricity doesn't stay on. It's off for 2 to 6 hours a day.
In these days, says Sinner, Africa will fall into anarchy and mass starvation. October the 1st, 1917. In Johannesburg, I see a wood pile about 100 yards in diameter. A table is set. Bowls of cold sump and cold porridge come on the table. I see mealy husks burning. In these days, Sinner says, white racism will be on the increase all over the world, especially in Europe. For the Afrikaner nation, it will be a dark time when many forces will be aligned against it. But then, he says, the Afrikaners will rise again and regain their freedom. The nation will take their destiny into their own hands. There will be a great silence before the storm. I see a pail full of blood toppling, falling. And from the pail will rise the Pyke flag to fly again over a free nation. When will this happen? When people asked Sinner for dates, he simply said, the time and place is known only to the Lord. But there are some indicators. In 1916, he tells his friend, Boy Musman, there will come a time when I will be once again in the news. In those days, I see we are still fighting amongst ourselves. Then it is over. We will have a black government. It is then that the Afrikaners' final and fiercest struggle will begin. On his deathbed, he said, I see the Pyke flying again. It is God's will. He will fight differently from the way we fought. But there will be more of you this time. And then he said something strange. This will come to pass when the ice starts melting.
Now, speaking of ice melting, and I think this is that's the climate change argument, right? Is that the ice is melting and it's your fault because you're driving a car. This was one of the top climate change experts for a lot of those large far-left medias. His name is Lawrence Krauss, seen here. Pulled this image actually off of a very liberal far-left outfit called the Daily Beast. Funny name they use there, the Daily Beast, in connection with all these sixes everywhere. Lawrence is pitted up in a photo next to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I think a part of the climate change arguments, if I understand them right, is that the ice is melting, and that's your fault. So people need to sacrifice their freedoms because the ice is melting. And more than that, that there needed to be a tax for the air. So the Prince of the Air wants to tax the air. Now, what's weird about this is that even on the edges of the ice, like right here, you have entire ecological systems, like frozen mammoths. Those are giant elephants, literally frozen while standing up. And you have everything from birds to bears to beavers and everything between. Entire ecological systems just frozen in place. Now, one might say to themselves, if you have even on the edges of the ice, entire ecological systems frozen in place, could you have ancient cities under that ice frozen? It's just a question. Could you have entire ancient cities frozen in place on the edges of that ice? You know, I had a friend one time tell me that the most treasured artifacts on earth, in fact, the kind of treasures kept in the palaces of princes and kings, well, those are all pre-flood artifacts, wouldn't they be? And there's a few ways to melt ice, and I don't think any of them include driving your car to work. Well, you can do that with explosives. You could get to things that are under the ice. And what's weird about the book of Revelation is it talks about this pit that is opened during the end times. where demonic things come forth. Now, demonic things are often affiliated with viruses or some portion thereof. Now, if you cut holes through ancient ice, then who knows what could be released in Abaddon's pit to the abyss. Just thought I would mention it. But whatever the case, because I know all the Richie Rich Soros type crowd people go out there on their giant boats to check on the penguins, make sure the penguins are okay out there in Antarctica and such. One of the things they do not tell you on the global warming issue is that whereas no matter why there might be some ice melting on a National Geographic documentary way over here in this little area, there's ice expanding on other areas, and that's a fact, Jack. Whatever the case, one of the ways that all of that was able to happen to South Africa is like boiling a frog, that slowly the freedoms were taken away and the people accepted it. Not only that, but that the financial burden on the common man while raising up the government officials, making a distinct separator between the common man and the government. And none of that has a skin color. They're literally starving out there, white and black alike. And Barack Obama, who we're making it to, praised Ramaphosa, saying that the work he was doing there was inspiring. The path you were headed on, very distinctly on a beeline, before Trump became president, was one that goes straight into the fire.
Being in line in a driving rain, very motivated Trump supporters wanting to see the president in person in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
We are Q.
Some of those people wearing and holding the 17th letter of the alphabet.
Are you holding a big red, white, and blue Q? Why do you have that?
It's a movement, man. It's the shift. I can feel it coming. Some call it the Great Awakening.
You're wearing a shirt that says Q, WWG, 1WGA. What does that mean?
It means where we go one, we go all.
QAnon is the people that believe in what Trump's trying to do to change our country.
I was standing in my garden. Suddenly, the Spirit came and removed from my eyes scales. I was praying for America and I was praying for Israel. Nothing unusual. And suddenly behind me, starting behind my back, going in the form of an arrow, were hundreds of thousands of people. And I turned around and I was stunned at what I saw. This was not just a mere dream, but this was a vision.
That had big letter Qs on them. Many media outlets covered that and explained what QAnon was and began to kind of dive into this breakthrough moment for this conspiracy theory.
People who believe in the QAnon conspiracy theory.
Are so broad and often
It's also
bizarre.
shockingly widespread. It's like an alternative reality game.
I thought it was just groups of people that were gathering excited about Trump. It is kind of spooky when you hear them all in unison yelling, "Conspiracy! Look the other way! Don't gather!"
And so I raised my hand like this, and every one of them raised their hands. I looked back and they were doing the same thing. I shouted, and they all shouted. They were one. They were one.
HBO host Bill Maher doubling down on his calls for a recession. He wants this economy to fail because somehow he thinks that will cause the president to fail. In other words, he doesn't like that the president is successful. I gotta tell you, I am so sick of the left rooting for this president to fail, because I'll tell you, we are one. We are Americans, and if the president fails, America fails, which means everyone fails.
Trump hasn't given any indication that he is aware of QAnon or believes it. He is the person who, I guess, inadvertently started it. He made a cryptic statement to reporters in early October where he talked about the coming storm. a statement that he then refused to explain.
Calm before the storm.
The phrase "the storm" has come to be super important to people who believe or circulate these posts, where the storm refers to this kind of coming mass justice against all of Trump's enemies.
She actually did a fairly good job of describing that. I give chops to her. That there are, in fact, large groups of people, Republican and historical Democrat alike, that believe there's something ugly brewing behind the surface, particularly when people are being asked to trade their freedoms for security, which is extraordinarily dangerous ground.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
Do you notice that the norms and standards, to quote The Atlantic, of American life seems to have changed overnight, and all of a sudden we're being told we must accept things that would have been completely unimaginable 2 months ago?
Well, Tucker, there's so much to talk about here. First off, I didn't realize I was going to be on a sci-fi show tonight, but we are entering a dystopian future. We are entering an authoritarian future.
And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment.
The notion that you could be deleted your channel for hosting this video, I'm not sure that is hypothetical anymore, and my question is very simple. How long before they come for you? You just wrote a book called Don't Burn This Book. How long before they come for the show? Sincere questions.
That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
We've never seen anything like this in the history of our country. It used to be a free place. We bragged about it. But it's happening, and not just online. The police commissioner of New York announced this week that political protests have been banned in America's biggest city. How long have they been banned? Well, for as long as his boss, Bill de Blasio, says they're banned. So it could be a while. It's nice when voters aren't allowed to criticize you. As the commissioner explained, that's the law now. Quote, "These are laws that have been passed down through executive order." Yeah, got that? Passed through executive order. But wait, by definition, executive orders aren't passed. No legislature signs off on them. They're ordered.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
Now, I'm sure you've heard this particular speech, which is often titled on websites, Democrat websites, as the speech that got him killed, where it is a speech that's coming down pretty strong on something that he seems to know, that seems to believe is a problem. I want you to listen to the words very carefully. Democrats, I'm praying for eyes to open amongst Democrats. There's something that has taken over and infiltrated your party. I'm asking you to come back, man, and to fight for your nation.
On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
This term conspiracy theory and its overuse comes from the CIA and newly released documents surrounding the murder of the Democrat president, who sounds an awful lot like many of the words from Trump. We pray over President Trump. John F. Kennedy.
Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
And the biggest news is former President Barack Obama, as of yesterday, has now been implicated in what is the biggest abuse and power corruption scandal in American history. So, Barack, Joe, what did both of you know, and when did you know it? We need to hear from you. And coming up, we'll show you all of the explosive new developments from the Intel Committee documents, hundreds and hundreds of pages of interviews that Adam Schiff has been hiding from the public because they reveal all of his lies.
I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
It's almost like the stuff talked about on those back channels is openly talked about from some of the main stages of your nightly news and other places. Now, weren't most of those Q posts about a day of reckoning that was coming for a deep state type of crowd? But then again, what do I know?
Buckle up. An avalanche is coming. I've been telling you about this. It will destroy, if there's any remaining credibility of the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists and the rage media mob in this country, along with their allies in the Democratic hate Trump left. And those that have abused power inside and outside of government, you are about to face the justice that many of you deserve. We have made a promise on this program that we will hold all of them accountable, which has been a central focus of this show. And tonight we are making real, significant progress on multiple fronts.
A key part of QAnon is this idea that Trump is, he's not just fighting against the deep state to the extent of like the intelligence agencies or the Clintons. He's fighting against what they believe to be global pedophile networks amongst the elites all over the world.
Now, while we're talking about conspiracies, and the letter Q is not actually a conspiracy, it's an alphabetical letter. It's just simply a letter. And you found movements of people that support their president. You know what I would support? You know, what happened to John F. Kennedy in the Democrat Party? What happened to courage in the Democrat Party? I tell you what, I'm calling. There's a lot of people who have been convinced that they need to always go Democrat. I am calling for people to come forth and have courage out of that party.
Fortunate because you consider yourself a civil rights leader. You're just attacking me. You're just attacking me. You haven't actually offered anything that's constructive for Black America.
All right, Leo, does anyone, Laura, does anyone watching your program honestly believe what she just said? I'll give you a straight. She said Democratic Party want black people to fail. See, those are talking points, Ms. Owens, because you know deep down inside, just because you disagree with the Democrats, you cannot assume that Democrats want black people to fail. That's what you just said on national TV.
I did, and I believe that, and I will back it up with facts.
Okay,
I will back it up with facts. I will back it up with facts.
You know that's not true.
I want to play something
Laura, you know that's
that
not
was
true.
said today. I
will back it up with facts.
I think a lot of Democrat leaders are freaking out and tried to kill her yesterday at that hearing.
They're afraid.
Because they don't want what she is saying to take hold in other parts of the black community. Leo, I honestly believe that.
In the meeting, the first famous meeting in the Oval Office between Trump and Obama, one of the topics of discussion was Obama coming down on Trump, razzing Trump, because how dare you use my song, Rick Derringer's Real American. The people here are still real Americans. They're still the same Americans they were. That song, now that was actually what's Hulk Hogan's theme song. And I mean, first of all, the important stuff that they should be discussing, Obama is supposed to be bringing up these special things. You're going to be the new president. And the big deal to Obama is coming down on Trump about using Real American.
Well, and he phrased it as my song,
Yes.
like it was his song.
Yes.
And did he even get permission or pay you for the song?
No, he hasn't paid me.
He didn't pay you. He didn't ask permission, and somehow it's his. Well, that was the whole nature of that presidency.
Yeah. And so
he hijacked your song, and then is mad somebody that had offered to pay you for it. Isn't that funny?
That's unbelievable.
Isn't it? It's astounding.
So that's
where this is the Freedom Tower, where the Twin Towers were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
I am a real American. Fight for the rights of everyone. I am a real American. Fight for what's right. Fight for your life. Best not mess with my U.S. When it comes crashing down and it hurts inside, gotta take a stand and don't have to hide. If you hurt my friends, then you hurt my pride. I gotta win the hand or I can't let it slide. I am a real American. Fight for the rights of everyone.
All right, everybody, please have a seat.
More than all
fellow
this, almost like a
Americans.
cherry on top. You got to imagine how Obama felt when Trump won. You got Trump right there in the middle of that same state dinner where he's got the birth certificate or whatever that document is that he has. That he played somebody else's song he hijacked after an election where he used somebody else's slogans that he hijacked. And he says this to Donald Trump, who's in the audience that night. No matter what anyone believes of Barack, he's no Ben Carson, and he knows that as well. Here's the clips of what he said to Trump on that particular night.
And I know just the guy to do it. Donald Trump is here tonight. Now, I know that he's taken some flack lately, but no one is happier, no one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald. And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter. Like, did we fake the moon landing? What really happened in Roswell? And where are Biggie and Tupac? All kidding aside, obviously we all know about your credentials and breadth of experience. For example, no, seriously, just recently in an episode of Celebrity Apprentice at the steakhouse, the men's cooking team did not impress the judges from Omaha Steaks. And there was a lot of blame to go around, but you, Mr. Trump, recognized that the real problem was a lack of leadership. And so ultimately you didn't blame Little John or Meatloaf. You fired Gary Busey. And these are the kind of decisions that would keep me up at night. Well handled, sir. Well handled. Say what you will about Mr. Trump. He certainly would bring some change to the White House. Let's see what we've got up there. So, yes, this has been quite a year in politics, but also in the movies. Many people, for instance, were inspired by The King's Speech. Wonderful film. Well, some of you may not know this, but there's now a sequel in the works that touches close to home. And because this is a Hollywood crowd, tonight I can offer a sneak peek. So can we show the trailer, please?
What did Barack Hussein Obama know, and when did he know it? Tonight we will unravel the biggest abuse of power scandal in American history, and it is more clear than ever before. Barack knew a lot. How much? We're going to dig deep tonight. Also, how involved was the former president in deep state spying, Russian disinformation, prosecutorial misconduct, unmasking, weaponizing intelligence? All roads now lead right into his Oval Office. And breaking just moments ago, acting DNI Director Rick Grinnell is now seeking to declassify any Obama officials involved in the illegal unmasking of General Flynn. We will explain. This is a huge development. Also, and a 300% jump in sidewalk homeless camps in San Francisco is now causing a massive outbreak. Nancy, maybe you could bring some ice cream or build a homeless shelter with all your rich friends and your multi-million-dollar mansions in your gated community. But we begin tonight with our top story, and that is President Trump is calling it Obamagate.
I mean, it's all, outlandish.
Yeah, it's very confusing. I mean, sort of and it's constantly growing. Sort of the gist of it is that Trump has teamed up with the military and sort of various virtuous world leaders, including Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, to take on this global cabal of Democrats and Hollywood elites and bankers and all this kind of stuff, who they claim are essentially responsible for all the evil in the world. And soon Trump will have all these people arrested.
Guys, I would point out I've never actually heard that Trump was going to team up with Kim Jong-un. I did hear that would be an enormous sign. The man with the stone for the giant of debt, the giant of socialism. Speaking of a global cabal, I'll tell you what, you guys make it sound extraordinarily exciting. So I'm looking forward to every last well-squeezed inch of that, and the CNN coverage, which we can assure is true at least 10% of the time. And somewhere in the mix, who knows, maybe you guys could go for another impeachment, and even beyond that, call Candace Owens back in and accuse her of racism somehow for whatever it was that it's always the racist card with the Democrat side, isn't it? And this is Nadler, by the way. This was the lead dude on going after Trump for the impeachment. And somehow they're accusing Candace Owens of being racist against black people while helping black people, I guess. And somehow tying it up with Hitler, because you always, if you're a Democrat, you got to throw Hitler into any equation to make it sounds like a better argument.
Not believe that we should be characterizing Hitler as a nationalist. He was a homicidal, psychopathic maniac that killed his own people. A nationalist would not kill their own people. That is exactly what I was referring to in the clip, and he purposely wanted to give you a cut-up similar to what they do to Donald Trump to create a different narrative. That was unbelievably dishonest, and he did not allow me to respond to it, which is worrisome and should tell you a lot about where people are today in terms of trying to drum up narratives. By the way, I would like to also add that I work for Prager University, which is run by an Orthodox Jew. Not a single Democrat showed up to the embassy opening in Jerusalem. I sat on a plane for 18 hours to make sure that I was there. I'm deeply offended by the insinuation of revealing that clip without the question that was asked of me.
Wow. Here with the reaction, communications director.
And these are all their words, by the way, that there would be elites and cabals and important people arrested. And by the way, that's already been happening, hasn't it? Now, just like a duality, the Q could also be for the word Kabbalah up there. Now, hold on a second before you have an allergic reaction on me. The Kabbalah in Hebrew literally means tradition. It is an esoteric method or school of thought in Jewish mysticism. Now, the Kabbalah is fascinating. Here's my issue with it. Just like you had two paths at the beginning of this film. To the Resh and the Zion. The Kabbalah, though fascinating, and I'm very familiar with it, it's man-based. The Kabbalah describes man. Man is the inner dimension of all spiritual and physical realms. So it's a selfish thing. It's a man-based, not God-based. Now, on the flip side of that, you have the Kadosh, which means sacred or holy. Two different paths, man-based or God-based, and you get to choose. But it does look like both are in the cards of this Joseph period. And it also looks like a day of reckoning for some is at hand. And under the concept of Kabbalah, and by the way, there's many, many fascinating, look, the mystical properties of God are for the glory of God. God says, I will not share